Haseeb, I'm really excited to have you on the show today because when we met in London last year, I had such a pleasure getting into your brain and understanding how you think about building audiences and community and influence. And so when I decided to start this show, Source Material, you were actually the first person that I wanted to talk to.
Is that right?
That's right.
Okay, that's a great honor. Thank you for saying that.
Thank you for saying
Even
yes.
if it's a lie, I appreciate that.
No, it's actually the truth.
Is it actually true?
It's actually the truth.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
I'm very honored.
I'm honored that you said yes.
Okay.
So when we were chatting in London, I think the first thing I asked you was, can you teach me to play poker? And you were like, don't be stupid. I was like, fair. But then I remember we had such an incredible conversation where I asked you about how you've created such an amazing audience for yourself online particularly. And the thing that you shared was that it all comes down to vulnerability and posting things that make you feel a little bit uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And after we had that conversation, you actually tweeted about our conversation.
I did.
And I want to share this tweet with you.
Okay. Oh, wow. You have a printout.
I actually printed. We're old school here. And one of the things that you said that really resonated with me is that the reason why most people suck at social media is not because they have nothing interesting to say. It's because they're afraid of the consequences of saying interesting things.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people were really interested in this tweet and what you had to say. So I'm curious if you could tell me more about this and how you arrived at this worldview of yours.
Yeah, it's something actually I was thinking about recently because I was chatting with another founder who has the same hang up about presenting their full self and their full set of opinions online. Most people who go through life, especially most people who end up on a successful kind of high impact track in life, they usually get there by doing what they're told to do. They get there by getting good grades, going to good schools, always showing up on time, always doing their work. It's more or less a life of showing that you're highly compliant, that you're very, you conform to what society wants you to do. And once you are in the public square, you realize very quickly that conformity is a path to instant and guaranteed failure. If your instinct is that I need to conform, I need to think what people want me to think, I need to say what people want me to say, you are going to suck in the public square. Because the public square rewards individuality. It rewards you saying the thing that it has not yet heard someone say. And the only way that's going to happen is by you overcoming either one, your own fear about embarrassing yourself, or two, your willingness to say what everyone thinks but doesn't think they should be saying. So, I think a word for this, Brian Kaplan, that I really like is the ugly truths. There are a lot of ugly truths in society that, even in our society, in the crypto world, there are a lot of ugly truths, things that we all kind of know, but we don't like to say, or we don't like to admit to ourselves. And very often there's enormous power in acknowledging these ugly truths. And it both gives you power and it also empowers the public conversation to encompass something that previously wasn't available to talk about. What's
an ugly truth that you have recently shared or talked about, or even an ugly truth that you are afraid to talk about at this time?
Afraid to talk about? That's a good question. I mean, this one's a little bit esoteric, but I recently got in a tussle online talking about stablecoins.
Okay.
And I made the claim that stablecoins are actually very cypherpunk, and that stablecoins are something that if the cypherpunks were around today, they would identify this as being part of their lineage of this renegade and deeply subversive project that they were engaged in. And this made people really mad.
I did see this.
I don't know why it sort of got picked up on in the kind of Bitcoin maxi circles. And people really, really did not like this claim. This was something that I remember I was having a conversation with somebody over dinner, and they were lamenting to me that, oh man, crypto's gotten so boring. All the things that I thought were going to be so subversive and so crazy about the world, like they didn't happen. Now it's all institutions and stablecoins. And I remember telling that person, like, well, actually, if you think about it, stablecoins are kind of fucking crazy. Like, we decided to make it legal that anybody in the world, no matter who they are, without ever asking a question, can just take $100 million into a cryptographic address and send it anywhere in the span of a second. And that's legal now. That's so insane compared to what we thought the last 50 years of financial and banking regulation, which has been largely this one-way ratchet of just getting more and more restrictive, more and more surveillance, more and more control over what you can and cannot do. And then all of a sudden, you can now just send dollars anywhere in the world at any time from anywhere. That did not have to happen that way. It happened that way because of the fight that we have all been engaged in, and it's now been recognized at a legal level. Now that's a maybe somewhat subtle argument, but it's one that I think got a lot of people talking in a way that clearly got a lot of people mad at me. And that's the other thing, is that most people, even if that's what an interesting little shower thought, most people are very afraid of making people upset. Not just disagreeing with them, but making them like mad that you're wrong.
Was there a point where you stopped being scared? Like, how do you feel when you are showing up on X and sharing these insights that you have? Like, have you always been fearless, or was there a point in your personal journey when you're like, I'm just going to let it rip?
I mean, to be clear, I am not fearless. I think if you are fearless, there's something wrong with your brain. Like there hasn't been a single controversial tweet that I have made that I have not thought like, maybe I should delete this. And on some level, like, you have to know that sometimes there is a line where you can say things that are genuinely wrong or hurtful or just genuinely controversial for their own sake without having any real value or anything that you're bringing to the conversation that makes it valuable. And you do have to ask yourself that question of like, does this really represent what I believe in, what I want to put out into the world? And sometimes I say something, it immediately gets a bad reaction, I delete it. Because, that like the world is a mirror, and it's showing you something about yourself and about the way in which you're communicating. But it's about your risk appetite to put something out there and see what comes back. With the tweet that I made about, if Satoshi came back and he saw stablecoins, he'd be like, holy shit, I won. I really thought when people started getting really mad about that tweet of like, okay, do I believe this? Do I really stand by this view? Because clearly it upsets a lot of people. And the answer was, yeah, I do. Yeah, I do. I do believe that. And like, if you get me in a room, I will tell you exactly why I think it's true. Now there's other things that, the funny thing is, like, I mean, this is such an, from a personal perspective, it's such an anodyne thing of like, who cares what Satoshi would or wouldn't think about stablecoins? But
apparently a lot of people.
Apparently a lot of people, right? But a lot of times, like, the tweets that I make that are most vulnerable, on some level, like, I kind of know are actually the safest, which is a weird thing to say, but it's very true. And you and I talked about this when I saw you in London. I think one of the tweets that I made that went the most viral was I tweeted about when I passed on the seed round of Solana. And the seed round of Solana, I think it was like a 10,000x return from when I passed on that seed round. And it was the worst pass in dollar terms that I've ever made in my life. And I posted the memo that I wrote, because back at that time I wrote memos on the deals that I passed on.
Good for you.
And so I shared the memo online. And now this is like, ostensibly, this is like, wow, what a huge fuck up as an investor to pass on that deal. But I kind of knew, like, who's going to be mad at me for passing on Solana? Like, obviously, this is something that people are going to find very interesting, to be in the mind of somebody who passed on one of the best deals in venture history. And so I think a lot of people reached out to me and they were like, wow, that was so brave of you to post that. And I was like, you don't understand. You don't understand. Not brave. Yeah, it's not brave at all. It's not brave at all. I knew that people would be really, that people would love that. People would love that kind of, that interesting display of something that is vulnerable, but like really actually not risky.
You're like, this is not risky.
Exactly. This is not risky. You don't understand risk. If you
on the scale of things you could be posting about.
Exactly.
It's actually not.
Exactly.
No, I appreciate that you share things and your lessons and learnings as well as the highlights.
Yeah.
It's very generous. I wanted to ask you, you are facing founders all day long, right? Yep. They're pitching you, you're deciding who to back. And one of my favorite quotes is actually from Don Valentine, founder of Sequoia. He has this really good quote, which is, the money flows as a result of the storytelling, right? Founders who are able to tell really incredible, compelling stories are the ones that get, the biggest investors and the most media coverage. So I'm wondering, from your vantage point, what are the commonalities that you see in founders who are able to tell a really good story?
What are the commonalities? I mean, it's one of those, it if you see it. things. Generally, it's a very hard skill to learn. Some founders can learn it if they don't have it to begin with. But most of the time, what you find is that you either have that instinct for storytelling or you don't. Storytelling, it's a skill that you have to build up over your life. It's not something you're going to learn by running a company. I think for most people, the thing that they really need in order to tell a story is they have to really believe in what they're doing. And if you don't actually believe in what you're doing and you're afraid, you're not going to be able to tell a good story.
This whole thing about building a cult, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So, and the thing is, when you see the people who are really great cult leaders, very often, like
many?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of great founders have that quality. They have that magnetism and that social gravity that pulls people into their orbit.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it's not that they don't doubt what they're saying. It's sort of like it's just, I remember this line from this TV show. I can't remember who it was, but it's like some woman who was an escort saying, every man I slept with, I loved them while I was sleeping with them. And I kind of feel like that's what it takes to be a great storyteller, is that while you're telling the story, you have to believe it. But on the other hand, like in order to not be delusional, in order to not be, in order to not be SBF, you have to also understand when you step away from the microphone, what your weaknesses are, what you need to work on, what you have to also be able to clearly see what's really happening within your business. And very often what you find is that the people who are really great storytellers, oftentimes they are a little bit too much in their own reality distortion field. And you have to be able to see past it. You have to be able to, have sort of your corrective lenses on. The people who can do both are the most terrifying.
Who was the founder of WeWork? Adam Newman.
Adam Newman, yeah.
I think like he had this.
Yes.
He still does, right? He's just raised another bunch of money from SoftBank and investors like that.
Well, I mean, he very clearly, with respect to WeWork, was a little bit delusional about the business model. You could tell they were extremely leveraged on real estate, and they were convinced that their business was much more durable than it really was. At the end of the day, it was a co-working business and not a all-inclusive lifestyle vortex, as he seemed to believe it was. And so, this is a real thing, right? Do you really have this kind of outside view of what you're doing, even while you're inside being the general rallying the troops? And you have to be able to do both. If you're too much of this, then you're not going to be able to really get people inside to believe and to charge to, a very, very risky battle with their lives. But if you just have this, then you may end up, marching into certain death.
Yeah. Or irrelevance.
Yeah. Worse.
What are the common mistakes that you see founders make when they're pitching you, when they're, not really telling a good story or selling a vision around their company? Now, we work in a very technical industry.
Yeah.
But as a VC, I think you have unique exposure to this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the most common failure mode I see from founders is that they really think that they're almost treating a pitch like a homework assignment or like a book report. And they think, okay, I have this deck, I have this collateral, I'm just go through the deck thing by thing. And then if I go through all of this and I do a good job, then I'm supposed to get money. And the best founders understand that an investment is a relationship, and you have to bring the other person along by first understanding who they are, what they think, what they understand, what they don't understand. And a pitch should not be this formula that you walk through, hitting the same beats every single time. The people who are best at pitching, it's much more like a jazz solo, in that you understand who the person is, and what you tell them is completely dependent on who they are and what they're bringing to the table. That kind of experience when you're chatting with somebody, a founder like that, is so much more of a delight than, sitting and having someone dutifully go through every single slide on a deck.
Sure. Yeah. I think that's one of the original sins of our industry too, is just not being able to explain why this technology is so incredible to everyday people.
That's right.
Who are not technical.
That's right.
And it stuns me that we're, a decade in and a lot of the biggest leaders in this space or founders still cannot tell this story to everyday people.
Yeah. And look, the way you tell the story is different for the person in front of you.
For sure.
And so one of the things that you can really, as a VC, when you're chatting with a founder, one of the things that you're always evaluating is what kind of a leader is this person? What kind of a communicator is this person? What kind of a salesperson is this person? So when I'm taking your pitch, I'm not just judging the content of your slide deck. I'm judging you and how your mastery of communication, of leadership, of knowledge about your particular area, what that tells about you as a leader.
Well, you're backing the person, aren't
That's
you?
right.
Yeah.
That's right.
You earlier this year raised a $650 million round. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm sure that took a lot of hard work.
I did.
You afterwards wrote a really great piece on how to build a VC firm, where you took people way back to the beginning and how you helped build Dragonfly.
Yeah.
And one of your pieces of advice to aspiring investors was to fake having a brand at first, and then, get a real one.
Yeah.
But fake it at the start and then leverage every angle or edge that they have, right? No matter how small.
Yeah.
I'm wondering what you had to fake at the start.
What I had to fake, I faked nothing.
Sure.
No, what did I have to
Same.
fake at the start? Yeah, exactly. When I first started as a VC, I had basically a rounding error of startup experience. So I worked on a startup very briefly, working on a stablecoin in 2017, back when stablecoins were tiny and not a very well-developed field. But I didn't take it very far. And so I didn't have a lot of startup experience. And so I remember when I first started getting pitches from founders, I sort of came in like, I obviously know nothing. And this person is coming to me like I'm some kind of authority figure. And it's almost like embarrassing that they think that I'm in this position of knowledge when I'm obviously not. I'm obviously totally clueless. And I found over and over again that just by virtue of me being a VC, people really, really listen to me. No matter what I said, they'd be like, "Oh, okay, that must be true because you're a VC.
Write it down.
Yeah, you know all the stuff." And it really messed with me for a long time because I'm like, well, obviously I'm, what the fuck do I know? I don't know anything. I've never built a company. I've never taken it public. I've never had an exit.
We don't say fuck on this program.
We don't.
No, we do.
Oh, we do. Okay, great. Because I will keep doing
just
that.
Messing with you. You felt like you didn't know what you were doing.
Yeah, I felt like I wasn't equipped or I wasn't qualified to give people advice. And over time, I came to realize that for one, like founders, being an investor is kind of a magic power. And the magic power doesn't come because you have a bunch of experience or because you know all this stuff that founders don't know, or you've seen so many, many people think, oh, you've seen so many startups, so you have such a wealth of knowledge. And that's partially true, but it's not that true with respect to the idiosyncratic issues at your particular startup or whatever it is that you're coming to me with. Like most of these things are cases of first impression. I don't know. I've never seen a situation like this exactly. But the magic power that an investor has is that you, uniquely to anybody else that founder is talking to, are outside of their little world, their little microcosm, their gravitational field, where everyone around them is lying to them. Everyone around them is trying to get something from them. They work for them. They're scared of them. There's some power relationship that everybody around that founder has with them that makes it very difficult for them to hear the truth. And as an investor, you live outside. You are, the person with the little magnifying glass looking at the ant colony. And because of that, you can just say what you see. And if you just say what you see of like, oh, you are really aggressive and you're scaring the people in your team who are not telling you what's going on, right? And if you're looking from the outside in, that's really obvious. There are all these dynamics in startups that are super, super obvious. It's like, when you go visit someone else's family for dinner and you just see all of the dynamics that are so obvious to anyone from the outside, they tell them like, wow, you and your mom really yell at each other a lot over the dinner table. It's like, what, really? It's like, yeah, actually a lot, right? Like that kind of thing is exactly what investors have at startups. And I realized like, you don't need to be an expert. You don't need to have some gigantic, repository of knowledge. All you need to do is to say what you see with your own two eyes. And that is honestly like 70% of what I do as an investor is just tell people what I see.
Hard truths.
That's right.
This, I think, links nicely to something else that I learned about you in London, which was really surprising to me, but your desire to be careful about what information you're bringing in. So, and I may have heard you incorrectly, but I'm pretty sure that you don't follow anyone on X.
No, that's not. I do follow people, but I don't read my feed.
Okay.
I don't use my feed.
So for the audience, you have 150,000. You have many, many followers, but you are not really engaging with anything on your feed. You open X and it's like a blank feed.
Correct. I have like a web blocker that prevents my feed from showing on my UI. And
why do you do that?
There's a Chrome extension called Feed Eradicator.
Wow.
And it will just block your feed. So like, everything, LinkedIn, Facebook, whatever, all the feeds, you can just configure them to just disappear.
Why do you do that, Haseeb?
I do that because I think these feeds are largely bad for your intellectual diet. I want to be very intentional with the information that I'm ingesting. And I think my rule is that everything that I do is pull-based, not push-based, meaning that I don't want some algorithm to tell me, here's what you should see. I want to be curating what I'm seeing and when I'm seeing it. And so, information I find through, I read newsletters, I chat with people, I'm part of groups, like I'm interacting with things, but I don't want to just be pushed content and be said, hey, you should look at this. Hey, you should look at that. Hey, that's effectively what a feed is. And so I very intentionally curate my digital information diet to avoid any feeds.
When did you do that?
I've been doing that for probably like 12, 13 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So pretty much your entire, like this chapter of your life.
Pretty much, yeah.
How do you think that's changed how you operate as a founder or a leader or even someone who is showing up in the public arena?
I don't know that it affects me very much in a way that's observable to anyone from the outside.
Has it changed your output perhaps?
I mean, I think at the margin it makes me more effective. I think I just spend less time scrolling feeds than other people, right? And I think it's like asking somebody, hey, you don't eat any Cheetos. How do you feel like that's affected your performance in life? It's like, well, like nothing specific. Like I'm probably healthier if I ate Cheetos. I just think that this is not the most intentional way to curate your information diet. I think it's very important to be thoughtful about the information you're consuming and the sources that you're pulling things from. That's not to say that X or, LinkedIn or whatever are bad places to get information. They're fine. They're obviously worse. You could be reading Blue Sky or something. But I think there are always levels to how thoughtful and intentional you can be in what you're learning and what you're ingesting. And I try to be as thoughtful as I can be.
You get a lot of your alpha from everyday conversations. I feel like and I've heard you talk about this, you have interesting conversations and then you share your insights straight away.
Yeah,
right?
I do. That's right.
Yeah. What's a really great insight that you've had recently? I'm curious. A good conversation you had recently. Not about stablecoins being very cypherpunk.
Not about stablecoins. That's a good question. I don't have anything on tap that I am that comes to mind immediately. Most of my conversations in the last few days have been very well, I mean, I've had a few conversations lately about the state of the industry that I was thinking about writing up, just about the vibes that I was seeing at Milken. But I don't know that I have anything that crisp yet. I'd have to think about it, congeal it into something. Yeah.
Chewing on it.
Yeah. Through the act of writing, I end up kind of, solidifying the general thought that I'm having.
Yeah.
Usually there's a kernel of something, right? So like this, when I had this conversation with this buddy of mine about stablecoins, it was this kind of brief exchange we had. And he was like, oh, that's a good point. And I was like, I should tweet that. But like the contours of what I wanted to say, it was just a scribble when I had it in my note.
It takes time. I've been ruminating on my big hot take for a while. Yeah.
Do you have one big hot take?
At the moment, I have a hot take, and I'm still debating whether or not to put it out there.
Okay, give me the amoeba version of the hot take.
I think that the go direct model is selling a lot of founders a lie and is actually doing them a disservice.
Okay, tell me more.
So essentially, I think crypto is a very good example of this.
Yeah.
Where a lot of founders are told that they don't need to speak to non-believers, right? It's like you're only speaking to the tribe, the acolytes. And I think what that does, if you are a younger founder or you're someone who is very technical and you're not Elon, you're not Mark Andreessen or any of these guys that actually came up through the traps and had to deal with legacy media and people who didn't agree with them. What happens to these founders is they don't get the sharpening of the skills that comes from talking to people that don't believe in what they do. They're only talking to people who agree with them.
Yeah.
And so I think what you see is when founders are in a really tough moment, when they need to speak to, regulators, lawmakers, or even traditional media, they don't really know how to do that. They're not able to talk about the importance of their mission or their work.
Right.
And so for me, my principle is it's yes and, right? You absolutely should go direct. You absolutely should talk to your core kind of hardcore fans and community, but you also need to develop the skills of talking to, the New York Times crypto reporter who, thinks that your project is a scam, or talking to lawmakers who don't understand, or even just talking to everyday people. I think that makes you a better communicator, and you have to talk to people who don't believe in what you're doing.
Right.
And so I think that that's why the go direct model is letting down a lot of people and is not the best model.
I agree with that in part. And I think it depends a lot on what you're doing. For most startups, they will never get a call from New York Times or a regulator.
That's true.
Most startups will just die in darkness. And you sort of eventually you earn the right for the New York Times tech reporter to call you a scam. Now that said, I think if you look at the big founders in our space, right, the people who are, the Polymarkets and the Hyperliquids and so on, for them, being able to speak across multiple registers is really important. And you can see that we haven't always done a good job of that as an industry. In fact, we've had some pretty horrific missteps. If you look back at some of the big founders and CEOs in our space who've done a real disservice by the way that they've failed to really congeal a story about why what they're doing is valuable for the world.
Yeah.
So I agree with you there, but I think the reality is that for the average founder, the average founder is so far from anybody giving a shit about what they're doing that, I mean, my advice usually to founders, like most of the time when I'm talking to founders, they don't have anybody doing PR because they don't have anybody, they're a seed stage company. And when they tell me I really want to widen the tent and attract more people into crypto, I'm like, shut the fuck up. You need customers, right? Your job right now is not to double the TAM of crypto. Your job is to get anyone to care about you. And that anyone will probably start with people who are already using your competitors.
Yeah.
So yes, and I think it's a yes, and.
It's great. Thank you for allowing me to test my material
of course,
on you.
That was
this
good.
is great.
It's very good.
Yeah. We were talking earlier off camera about reinvention, and you are someone who has reinvented yourself.
Yep.
For the uneducated, you walked away from your first career as a professional poker player, and I don't think you left on terms that you would have liked. It ended with you apologizing and then having to do some soul searching.
Yeah.
How are reputations rebuilt? What did you learn from that experience?
Yeah, that's a heavy question. So the short version of the story is that when I was a professional poker player, I backed this other player who ended up cheating, and I defended him. And that ended up blowing back on me. I was 21 at the time, and I had no idea how reputations worked. And I think moving on from poker after that, I was very young, and I dropped out of school to play poker. I was a professional. I was sponsored, and so that was kind of the only thing I'd done in my life was build this career as a poker player. And when I left that behind, and I had to figure out who I was and what I wanted to do with my life, it was one of the hardest and probably darkest chapters for myself as a person, because it was, I'd been playing poker professionally from 16 until I was 21. It was, I made a bunch of money as a young man. I made a name for myself. I had all these people who looked up to me, who adored me, who I thought I was an amazing person, who then went to looking at me thinking that I was this piece of shit. And that was probably the hardest thing that I personally have gone through, is this feeling of total rejection from my own community. Now, in retrospect, I think all of this was a tremendously valuable lesson for me in being able to, one, figure out who I really am and what I really value as a person. And you're only ever going to really learn that by being confronted with the parts of yourself that you like and the parts of yourself that you don't like. And so my own fear and my fear of being associated with this person, or my fear of him being found out, and as a result, my relationship with him being found out, led me to lie to people and try to deflect my relationship with him. I learned through that two things. One is that it's so important to always be honest, transparent, and direct. And that's a big part of, I think, what's led to my cultivation of myself now as a public figure. Is like, my first instinct is always just say what happened, just be transparent. And if, the reality was, my relationship with this guy, I didn't cheat. I didn't actually do anything. He's the guy who cheated, but I was so afraid that my relationship with him would tarnish me, because people would think like, well, if you're so close to them, you must have cheated. And it's like, well, I mean, ironically, the fact that I was trying to distance myself from him was in fact the thing that ended up tarnishing me. And so I've just learned, like, there's an old saying, I can't remember who said it, but, anything that you wouldn't be comfortable reading in the newspaper, don't do it. And that has taken me a long way in kind of building my career and my intuitions as being a very public person. And the second thing I'd say is, you have to learn at some point that your power comes from yourself and your ability to move forward in your life and accomplish your own goals. It doesn't come from other people. And if you're really convinced that other people are the source of your capabilities, then you are going to be very, very afraid to do anything that's going to upset people. And so I learned through basically the hard way, is that I was the only one who was going to be responsible for my own success and my own reinvention. And that is a large part of what gives me confidence when I go out into the world and I say an unpopular opinion, or I do something that might piss people off, is that, look, if people are pissed off at me, it's okay. I think about some of these folks who are extremely public in careers that are often very non-public, right? So I think actually the one I think a lot about is Bill Ackman. Hedge fund managers are notoriously very private. They're very behind closed doors. They don't upset people. They basically want very much to enjoy their billions in privacy.
Yes.
And in fact, it's a big part of why you want to make a lot of money, is to retreat from the public eye and to not be in the crosshairs. Bill Ackman is the exact opposite, right? He is an extremely public, almost pathologically public person. And it's, I don't know that much about his returns, but it's obviously a large part of his power is the fact that he has made, he's got a lot of moments of foot and mouth syndrome, but he goes out in the public square and does it again and does it again and does it again. And that's what earns him the right to keep doing it. And I actually think about, not that I want to emulate him per se, but I think about him as being one of these quintessential examples of the different ways in which you can vest your power in your public persona that allows you actually to advance your career in places where people normally think that the risk reward is only to the downside.
I like this, because this is something that I wanted to ask you about, which was your approach to building a brand. And you talk about this in your success with Dragonfly and how to build a VC firm.
Yeah.
You talk about investing in your own brand, encouraging your colleagues to also invest in building their own brand and profile. Do you think that Dragonfly has such a great reputation because of the deals that you've done, or because of the brand that you've built around the firm?
Well, I think the answer is always both. And the two of them, they co-create each other. So I remember when I posted this article about how to build a VC firm, there was one founder who commented, "Oh, you're only saying this because you're a famous person. And so because you're famous, you were able to build this great firm. And it was like, you have exactly the other way around. When I started this, nobody knew who I was.
Right.
Like my public reputation was co-created with this firm, and the two of them fed on each other. As I built my reputation, I was able to build Dragonfly. And as Dragonfly was built, it was able to build my reputation. Yeah. And so I always think of it the same way, is that it's a conversation. The two things are working together with each other. The more that you build your public brand, the more you're going to get into great deals, and great founders are going to want to work with you. And your ability to tell the story and to have that megaphone and to have some influence and be a marker of taste and quality is going to help those projects succeed, which helps bring the next project that wants to succeed. And it's a virtuous cycle. Without that cycle, it's really, really hard to succeed in venture. You have to have some kind of unfair advantage. We didn't have any obvious unfair advantage. We're not famous. We're not A16Z or Sequoia or whatever. So we had to build it. And the only way you can build it is through this kind of co-creative loop between building your brand and building the brand of, being the way I describe it in venture is famous for being famous, where people want to be in your portfolio.
The Kardashian model.
Exactly. They want to be in your portfolio because the other stuff that's in your portfolio.
Are you the Kim Kardashian of crypto VC?
I think I am. Yeah, I'd say so.
It's good advice. And I think that, I'm wondering at what point you realized that this was going to be important for Dragonfly's success. Did you have this realization before you went into investing, or when did this light bulb go off for you?
I mean, when I started investing, I was at another firm called Metastable, which was a very early crypto VC founded by Naval Ravikant. And when I was at Metastable, Metastable was legendary fund at that time. It was one of the largest funds in the space. I think it was probably second only to Polychain at that time. And of course, Naval was such a well-known public figure that it was really easy for us to get into deals. And so when I was at Metastable, I never had to fight for a deal. Basically, we would decide, everybody would come talk to us, and we would just say, oh, this one. And we'd say, hey, Naval, go talk to them and get us some allocation. And he'd say, yep, I got it. And they would always give us allocation. And so that's what I thought investing was when I was at Metastable. And so when I left Metastable and came over to start building out Dragonfly, that was not our experience. I kind of realized oh shit, winning allocation deals is hard. People don't want to give you any space in their round if they don't know who you are or why you're valuable to have there. Every single deal, you have to earn it with what you're bringing to the table, and you have to convince them that you earned that slot on their cap table. And so that's when it really clicked for me. When I was at Metastable, I was public and I tweet stuff, whatever, but it was not with the same level of rigor and seriousness that if we don't do this, if we don't manage to build this brand and get people to really know who we are and put ourselves on the map, we have no shot of winning. We're going to be relegated to being this second, third tier player. And so I was like, okay, challenge accepted. When I started Dragonfly had no public presence whatsoever. There was a website with just a little, logo on it and nothing else. And I remember I started a blog called Dragonfly Research, which was really just my blog. I mean, it was just me kind of writing kind of smart stuff that I was thinking and calling it research. And at that time, it was pretty easy to pass something off as research because there weren't a lot of people who were writing kind of in-depth stuff about crypto. And people were like, okay, well, I guess if you're calling it research, sounds like research. And I had, a couple articles that ended up getting a lot of attention, getting people talking. And for a lot of people, that's where they first heard of Dragonfly, was just these blog posts I wrote about kind of shower thoughts about crypto. And that's how you do it. It's you slowly, gradually, you build a legend. And eventually you step into that legend when you have the ability to prove it. So eventually we did have researchers and we did have an actual research team. But in the beginning, no, it was just me writing things that I thought would sound smart.
That's awesome. I love that scrappiness, and I think it makes you better in the long run, right? You have to be very resourceful. We do this for our clients at our PR agency as well. It's how do we create news and attention? Yeah. And it's always easy when you're, the king and everyone wants to do deals with you and do business with you, but you have to work that much harder when no one's ever heard of you, when you're the underdog. You prefer podcasts and long form interviews
I
over
do.
TV segments watched by millions of people.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Did you get this from Annika?
I'm not going to reveal my sources. But
Okay.
yeah,
Yes,
tell me
yes.
more about that, because like you've sat down with me, given me this time of yours
I have.
for a new show
Yep.
when you could have spent this time, chatting to Bloomberg or CNBC.
Sure.
So tell me about that decision and why you prefer long form opportunities.
Yeah. So a few reasons. So I find TV to be, TV is like the kind of standard prestige media, right? It's like, oh, you've got a byline in the, CNBC or Bloomberg. You can put on your thing. You can add it to some list.
All
of
love
things.
to our friends, by the way.
Yeah.
We
Look,
love you
you're all
guys.
great. I'm sure. They're not watching this, so it's fine. I'm kidding. Here's what I'd say is that TV is kind of the standard, most low context viewer. It's somebody who just happens to be watching a channel in the background, probably muted while they're at work or something like this, right? It's like the level of engagement somebody has with TV, of this sort of transient, low context media, is just very low. And in general, my view is that the reason to get on TV is either you're on one of the blockbuster shows, like you're on Squawk Box or something. It's like, okay, people are actually watching this, or you're basically there for this kind of background prestige. But the difference with podcasts, the difference with long form, is that one, people usually listen to long form and they're engaged because they're driving or they're working out and they're actually listening to the whole thing. It's not just background noise very often when they're engaging in this kind of media. And second, they really get to know who you are. They have a lot more texture about who this person is, as opposed to this person is a stand-in expert on the segment that we're doing today, right? Like when you're on Bloomberg or you're on one of these TV shows, you are cast into being this, we need somebody to be like, civil engineer to talk about why the bridge fell down, and you are a civil engineer. And like, okay, we're going to give you the little byline and here's where you work, but like, that's not what's important. What's important is that you're commenting on this story that we're talking about today. Whereas with long form, very often it's not like, we're not talking about some story. We're not talking about something. We're talking about each other and we're talking about ideas. And that stuff is much more likely to stay with people and to have an impression on them. So if even, let's say, just for the sake of argument, let's say that, it's some, super prestige media, primetime, daytime TV, maybe it'd have 10 times the views of a podcast. But the people who are listening to that podcast are going to be really listening and remembering the things that I'm saying. And it's going to be much deeper about who I am and make an impression of like, oh, I think I understand who that person is. But on, some daytime TV, I'm going to get in 3 points about whatever the story of the day is. And that's pretty much it. So that's why I prefer podcasts over traditional daytime TV.
How do you balance the two right now as you think about how you're spending your time as a founder, as one of the faces of Dragonfly?
Yeah.
What do you feel like a good mix is? Because I think there's going to be a lot of founders and operators who are watching this, how does Haseeb do this?
Look, I will say you have to be thoughtful about what podcasts you do, because there's an infinite number of podcasts.
Sure.
And so there are, just a random dude in his basement who's like, hey, I'll bring you on the blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, this is maybe not worth an hour of your time. But for the most part, the other advantage, of course, is that with a lot of TV, you have to like go into a studio and there's a lot more.
Your hair and makeup done.
My hair is a real mess to do. So that does take a lot of time.
So much time.
It's like, and you get all of that for like a, 6-minute appearance in the middle of a Bloomberg, show. Whereas for a podcast, like for a lot of podcasts, you literally just turn on your camera and then you go. Yeah. So the amount of time that you're spending in order to get the, per content is much more efficient. That said, if it's TV that I think is really valuable, so it's got a lot of distribution, or, it's something that, is a story that I think is I want to get out to this particular audience. The other thing to understand is that TV and podcasts have very different audiences. And the kinds of people who are going to be watching Bloomberg TV or watching CNBC are very different from the people who might be listening to your podcast or listening to a different podcast, right?
Or your own.
Or my own. So podcasts, and that's the thing, of course, is that podcasts have very different audiences from each other. It's not as though there's a podcast audience. And so you have to be thinking about what is the audience for the show? And is it important to me to get in front of this audience? So there might be, some random public interest thing that just is totally irrelevant. Might be fun, but it just is not useful. Some podcast about, I don't know, Men's Style or something. I don't know why they
You
bring me
would
on.
be a really important
I would be a
guest
very
on that
strange
show.
guest for them to have on that kind of show. But yeah, it'd be totally irrelevant to any of my professional goals, even though it might be a lot
Your
of people.
next business could be a fashion line. We don't know.
They have Dragonfly would have to go really badly for that to be my fallback.
I don't see it happening.
But you know, if there's a show that's like has very few people who watch, but they're all really powerful people, then okay, maybe I want to be on that show. TBPN. That's right.
One more question, Haseeb.
Okay.
And then we're going to do rapid fire.
All right, give it to me.
I'm going to read a quote to you.
Okay.
Cultivate power. This is one of the last steps in transforming your fund from an upstart to a power player. A wise man wrote that.
Did you know?
It was you.
Okay.
This was in your guide to building a VC fund.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that quote.
Yeah.
And what it means to you to cultivate power.
When you are an upstart, it's very, very difficult to be thinking in terms of power because power is something that everyone else has. And so a lot of what you're doing when you are an upstart is you are cultivating your skills. You're cultivating individual abilities of, okay, I can help you with recruiting. I can, help send out a message. I can help you with BD relations. I can help you with this. I can help you with that. The bigger you get and the larger scale that you start competing on, the more power starts to matter. And power, it's difficult to define. It's somewhat amorphous, but you know when you see it, which is that this person can solve problems for me. They can move other powerful people. And a lot of what startups do is that they have skills, they have abilities, they have knowledge, they have competence, but they don't have power. Big companies have power, right? Incumbents have power. And I came to realize this from, there was an interview that Mark Andreessen kind of put it the most lucidly of anyone that I've heard, which is that the business of venture capital is renting your brand and your prestige and your power to startups who don't have it yet, but will get it soon. You sort of lending it against them and against their name is principally the most important transaction that happens in venture capital. And that's why it's very important to have power, to cultivate that power so that you can give it to the people who deserve it.
You included that thinking, I think, in that same article. And I was reading it earlier today and a light bulb went off for me because I realized that I'm also trying to do that with my own agency. Like, how can I get to a point where I am respected, revered, recognized enough, have great relationships that I can bring the companies we work with along with us and open doors for them. And I really like that. I think it's very, very interesting philosophy.
Yeah.
Okay. Rapid fire.
Okay. Let's do it.
Best thing you read or watched this week?
Best thing I read or watched this week.
And you don't have a lot of feeds going, so.
I don't. I listened to, there's this video on YouTube. There's a YouTuber. He's a monetary economist. I forget the name of the channel, but there was a video, like a sort of long form video where he talked about the myth of the petrodollar that I found actually very fascinating. And I didn't know very much about it. And so it was actually one of the biggest kind of mental shifts for me. The short version is basically that there's the common story about the petrodollar is that, when Nixon, basically broke the gold standard, there was a deal that was struck with Saudi Arabia that, the oil was going to be priced in dollars. And this was the birth of the petrodollar, which is that this is what, the oil trade being denominated in dollars is what ultimately buoys the value of the US dollar after you break away from the gold standard. And the assumption was that this deal with Saudi Arabia was, okay, in exchange for, us militarily protecting you with the US military, you agree to price all of your oil sales in dollars. So I'd always heard that story. That's like the standard story that you hear. It turns out that in 2016, through a FOIA request, the actual treaty that was signed with Saudi Arabia was declassified and was basically revealed for the first time in 2016. And in that document, it's very clear that there was no agreement to price all oil in dollars. In fact, the agreement was not to price oil in dollars. The agreement was for Saudi to stabilize the price of oil. That was the agreement. And it's a broader thing. I recommend that you look this up about the myth of the petrodollar. It's very, very interesting. But it's one of these things that, like, you know, especially if you're in crypto and you're in these kind of monetary circles, you just hear these stories that are told over and over again. And it's always, I find, very refreshing to come back to first principles and understand, like, hey, is this really true? Because of course, you know, there's all this story about Iran pricing their oil in yuan and now in Bitcoin. You know, is this some violation of the petrodollar myth or the petrodollar
turns out it doesn't
monopoly?
exist.
Does that mean that the US dollar is going to fall off a cliff? Of course, the US dollar did not really respond to the fact that Iran is doing that. And the question is, okay, why is that if the petrodollar is so important? And the other thing that he points out is that, look, in the 70s, the oil trade was an enormous part of international trade. It was an enormous part of what caused international finances to get settled in different currencies. Today, it's something like 1% of total international trade of dollars moving around the world is oil.
Wow.
Actually, because we're net exporters now, and there's a lot else that's going on that explains that. The much bigger share of demand for dollars is actually manufacturing. So our relationship with China actually matters way, way more than our relationship with the oil trade and OPEC countries.
I mean, there's so much that we could talk about.
Yeah. So anyway, that is my answer to your rapid fire question. Not very rapid.
When we launch our show, we can talk about geopolitics.
Okay, amazing.
I'm so fascinated with China's plan and the Belt and Road project, and I just think it's like they're playing what is it, chess? We're playing checkers.
You think so?
I don't know. I was in Costa Rica a few years ago, and I just saw the major highways and infrastructure they were building there, the ports, just making these developing nations totally dependent.
I think it's more complicated than that. I think it's more, but we don't have to necessarily go into it. We're doing rapid fire. It's not very rapid fire.
No, it's not rapid at all. A hill you're willing to die on.
The hill I'm willing to die on. Ooh. I think the First Amendment. I'd say free speech.
Damn, Haseeb.
And yeah.
Please continue.
No, I'm very alarmed by the march on both the left and the right for increased censorship. Censorship. I mean, everybody cries that, oh, we're being censored, and their antidote to that is censoring the other side. Mm-hmm. And I think the intuitions behind liberalism are dying in our country. You can see it very clearly in young people. Young people do not overwhelmingly believe in free speech. And that I think it's a principle that right now it's basically just our system of law that is protecting the institutions that I think led to our liberal society. And I think they're at real risk of eroding. So that's a hill that I would die on.
Jeez. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Who should I have on the show next?
Who should you have on the show next? I would say Eric Voorhees is somebody you should have on the show. I think he'd be an amazing guest.
Smart guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Haseeb Qureshi, thanks for your time.
Thank you for having me, Ebony.
Appreciate it.